Hi, everybody.
Hi, thanks for
Hi.
joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm gonna give you an easy one to start with. When did you start writing, and are you a pantser or a plotter?
Oh, I've probably always written, I think. I started writing most seriously, maybe like 2013. I started writing fan fiction, and then I started writing novels in 2018. And I am such a control freak, and I am a plotter to the maximum degree that anyone can plot.
Okay. Um, what would you say your inspiration was for the Dominion series, and do you have a favorite character?
I do have a favorite character.
Oh,
I think actually it's no secret. Lola is my favorite human. The inspiration, I think I was thinking a lot about representation in mainstream media and this kind of fantasy of what if there were these high-powered group of women kind of pushing for more uh, good representation throughout, all the different kind of platforms. So it was very much wishful thinking, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely talked about that on the book club that we really appreciated the world that you created for us where that was something that existed and that we had that
Mhm.
going on. So we really appreciated that.
Yeah, hopefully it's aspirational. It'll happen one day.
I hope so.
okay. And I have a question here. You are known for your very spicy scenes. We were just describing the flow of this series, and how it slightly intensified with each book until we were all like, "Oh my God, bam!" in book three. But so we've heard from a lot of authors that the sex scenes are especially hard to write. What about you?
They are hard to write, and I think um it's because you want to convey so much, right? Because it's not really about the physicality, I think, of the scene. It really sort of like a good, to me anyway, a good steamy scene is only as good as what's come before it, usually. So it's like this kind of build up and wanting the scenes to kind of do something every time you have one. And obviously, Natalia, I don't know how many sort of character arc by orgasm there have been, but what she was, which was exhausting. Exhausting, like 100%. It's like, oh my God, like let go, please. But they are hard to write, but I think not because so much because they're steamy. I think because you want them to be so powerful. You want them to really move the character arc forward and do something for these two people, and not just be steamy. I mean, obviously also be steamy, but kind of doing as much as they can do, and that it's worth the wait.
Agreed. And it was like that title of the last one, relinquishing control was like, oh, what she had to go through to
Yeah.
relinquish in inch of control was yeah, well done. It unfolded really nicely.
Thank you. It was very hard.
Sounds like it.
I've got a
Want me to go? Okay.
Yep, I've got a question from Clara. It says all your books have in common great chemistry and readers and Cuban culture that make them feel like we are welcome and a family each time, but the stories are very different with a different dynamic. How does inspiration come for you?
So I've tried to do kind of different facets of sort of different familial dynamics because it's like you kind of run out of your own experiences, like how your own family kind of works. And then so I've also taken inspiration from families that I've been a part of, right? Like my wife's family, my best friend and I have been friends since seventh grade. So it's like I know her family, I know her wife's family. And these are all kind of variations of we're all the same culture, but it's so different in the way kind of like it manifests. And it might be different depending on what sort of like are they first generation sort of Cuban or were they born in Cuba and they came here and all those things kind of change the way the family kind of is and how they interact with each other and how Americanized or not they are. So I've tried to always tell a true story, but hopefully kind of capture different aspects and angles of it to, I mean, not only just make it interesting, but make it even diverse within itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked quite a bit in the book club about that piece of your writing, and it was even said that your settings are kind of like an additional character. And I do have a question here. This is Miami is the home base for most of your books. Why and what does Miami mean to you?
Well, so when I first started writing, I think like so many writers, I wrote like the story was set in New York. And it's like, what the hell do I know about New York, you know? So it's like I've been, but it's not the same. And Miami's my home. It's where I was born and raised. So I felt like it was something I could do authentically, and give kind of different. Miami's huge. It's not, there are so many, it's like a very sprawling kind of city. So there are so many different parts of Miami, and I've tried to kind of visit different ones, like throughout different books. But so it's home, you know, and I like to portray the good with the bad, which is the traffic and humidity.
That definitely comes through. I feel like your characters have very real feelings about Miami. It always makes me chuckle when they, kind of complain about some things and fiercely defend others, just kind of sprinkled in. I was like, that's real because I love where I live, and also I will be the first to criticize the things that are less enjoyable about
Exactly.
living here. So yeah, I love that piece. Jamie Rose said in book three, you give us a sex scene that could rival chapter 18 from Destination U for steamiest scene ever. How much do you work to improve your steam craft?
Oh, quite a bit actually. Thank you so much for noticing. Um, and I think it's also because you kind of want to bring something a bit different every time. So I spend a lot of time thinking about them and kind of the different ways that people can connect in that intimate way. And also just like variety, right? Because it's like, I don't know, you don't want to give like the same kind of interaction, let's say. So I think about it quite a lot. I run a lot of ideas by my wife, bless her. And I'm like, do you think this and this? And she'll be like, no. Oh, okay. So we kind of troubleshoot my sex scenes quite a bit.
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And some things are just hard to describe. There's so many ideas I've had where it doesn't translate just because it's like nobody wants to read like a Twister game. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much explaining I'd have to do. If I could just draw you guys a little stick figure, you'd be like, oh, I get it. But sometimes I've, scrapped entire scenes where I'm just like, this is like figure A goes to figure B. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
I have to simplify.
Yeah. I
That's
definitely
an
don't
that's an
think,
oh,
no, go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say that would be an interesting diagram in a paperback or ebook to have that
I
like
have
in the back.
I've drawn chapter 18 for people. I feel like when I've said I've been at like panels and things and I've said, oh, reverse cowgirl scissoring, especially straight people, not for nothing. I'll be like, I'm sorry, what? I'm like, oh, let me draw it for you. And it's big hit.
Too funny. I have a question in the chat. Emma's asking, did you plot all three books prior to releasing the first, or how did you keep track of the characters and development?
I did. So I plotted the first two. I actually wrote Fighting for Control, Lola's book first. And then I realized it was the wrong first book. So it was all the way written when then I wrote Losing Control. I think it just kind of made sense. It was like a better introduction into the world. And I had outlined most of Natalia's book, like the big kind of big the key moments. I hadn't like completely outlined the whole thing. But I do usually try to know where it's going so you can see some kind of satisfying little Easter eggs throughout the book so you can kind of like feel like, okay, I'm getting excited to get to know Lola and I'm excited to understand Natalia. So yeah.
I have another follow-up. So following up on Natalia, um, says Natalia Flores is a hard-ass founder and all-around boss bitch of Dominion. What was your inspiration for her?
Every difficult woman I've ever loved, right? Like, I just love strong, intense, uncompromising. Like, we're so not to say we're not allowed to be that, but women who tend to be like that are villainized, right? It's like you're difficult, or you're exacting and whatever else. So it's a love letter to all those kind of like women that we've seen, usually the villains, right? In TV shows or movies or whatever it is. And it's like, no, you can be strong and driven and be a good person, even if you're sort of misunderstood. But it's like, I think her motivations have always been so honorable and so good. And it's like, well, she doesn't have to be nice to you. And that's okay. I want her to be not nice to me all the time.
Yeah, she could just be unapologetically herself, and that just is
Exactly.
enough. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I think I know the answer to this, but one of the questions is why was her story last in the series?
Um, I definitely wanted to build towards her. And honestly, it took me a long time to figure her out. I don't think I could have written her book even as a standalone. Um, it took me a really long time to understand how someone, how to get sort of like I always call her like the iciest ice queen, right? And it's like to humanize her, even to myself, was really hard. To make her more than, I don't want to say caricature, but more than this figure that you never actually have to like break down and understand. So honestly, it took me a long time. It took me a really long time. It took me, I think, over a year to understand her character and to be able to then tell her story well. Um, and I've been thinking about her too a lot of ways, and I think her where we meet her at the beginning of the story, I think is almost like a cautionary tale for Lola. And it's like without that kind of softening and vulnerability. So I think Natalia was very alone in a lot of ways that I don't think she wanted to be so alone. And I think that's where Lola would have ended up had she not kind of, started doing that inner work of getting to know herself. But also just honest, she was last because that's how long it took me to get her.
That makes sense. She's a tough nut to crack.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I've got a couple questions in here from people in the chat. Catherine wants to know, is there any specific scene from any of the three books that sticks out the most to you?
I think the scene I always think about, and I think it was, I don't usually make myself cry, but I made myself cry, which is stupid. The turkey sandwich in the hotel when Carmen leaves Lola the sandwich.
Mhm.
Um, I know, it's just like, oh, she's just like this little feral creature. And it's like, I think it's my favorite scene, I think that I've ever written. I thought it was such a, like how easily people who haven't known kindness can be absolutely unraveled by kindness, and how not Carmen didn't even think about it. It's like she was just like, oh, she's gonna get here late. Like so many of us might, it's not a conscious thought like, oh, she's gonna love that I've done this. And how it broke her. It broke Lola, like absolutely broke her. So I think that'll always be my favorite scene.
We talked about that quite a bit in the book club, actually.
The
So you
turkey
should know that
sandwich.
scene did land, I think, with readers the way that it did with you. I really appreciated how much time you gave the scene, that she noticed every little thing, like the ice not being melted in the cup, and like because that is a lot of thought that Carmen had to put in. And you're right, when you're not used to that kind of consideration by somebody else, when someone does it, it will jar you. It will be shocking. It will open your eyes and make you realize that, that you can be treated in that way, even though you never have been. So I think it was great.
Yeah, a
I think that,
destabilizing
yeah,
turkey sandwich.
Yeah.
yeah. I was already in love with Carmen, and then I think that scene melted me completely with Lola. I want to hug her now. Just,
Me too.
it's a
Me too.
great
I'm
scene.
such
Yeah.
a sucker for Carmen.
I've got a comment from Tanya that says, I'm terrible at this chat, but you're not. You did it, Tanya. I'm proud of you. All I want to say, all your books make me want to drive down to Miami and eat. Have you ever checked out Union City, New Jersey, Havana on the Hudson?
So I lived in South Jersey for a little while. So I did go up to North Jersey. I can't remember specifically where. I think it was somewhere in Bergen County. Went to a few Cuban places that were okay. It's a little different. There's a New Jersey Cuban and Miami Cuban rivalry, but I don't wanna start anything, you know?
All right. Clara says Dominion is a TV show written by Lainey from For Love or Scandal. How would you picture the show if it was really made? One season for each character or book, or the three love stories growing in parallel in chronological order?
What an amazing question. I think in parallel, but at very different paces. So I think kind of matching up to like the one, two, three of the books, I think Roxy and Adriana had like the least conflict to resolve. It was all very external conflict. So I think that's quicker, if that makes sense. So I think we'd see the growth of all three couples at once, but have Roxy and Adriana kind of moving much more quickly than the other two. And then obviously then I think Lola and Carmen, and then I think very long game for our poor suffering Sam and and Natalia.
For sure. I think I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Um, Bridget says one of the things I love about fighting for control is the commitment to giving us believable, real enemies before the lovers, similar to objecting to her. Can you talk about how you craft your enemies to lovers to give us that payoff?
Enemy slivers is my favorite thing on planet Earth. I love writing two people bickering. It just feeds my soul. It makes me so happy. I love when people hate each other but want to sleep together. It's amazing. Never seen it in real life. I think when we don't like people, we just don't like them and we never speak to them again. So I think the key for me to make that work is, why do these two people have to continue to interact? Because I think if that conflict is kind of strong enough of why they cannot sort of extract themselves from each other's orbit, and you keep having to run up against this person in a believable way, I think it starts to build that tension and that excitement, you know, and that conflict. And I agree. I hate when it's an enemies to lovers and they like by chapter three, it's over. And it's like, no, I want to see them hate each other for a while. It's very amusing. So I really think a lot about, why do they hate each other? And or why don't they like each other if they're rivals or whatever it may be? And then why do they keep having to interact? When you don't like someone, you avoid them, you know, but can't, it won't be a great romance if they're never together.
For sure. Steph says, how much fun was it to write the magical chaos fairy that is Roxy? And was it intentional for her to be this catalyst for love and family in the world of Dominion?
Um, Roxy was so easy and fun. And I think at first I kind of worried that people wouldn't like her, um, because she was so like childish at the beginning, you know, and I think it's like, be like, okay. Um, but she was just really fun. And I think she's just like a super bright, happy character. It's like, I don't know. I feel like everybody kind of like falls for her charm. I don't know. Maybe I fell for her charm.
I in the very beginning of that book, I was like, okay, what are we gonna do with her? Like what,
Yeah.
I was very curious to keep reading. She's not necessarily my kind of person, you know.
Oh,
Um,
me neither. I could have spent 5 minutes
right.
with her. Like, ugh,
Right,
okay.
yeah. So I was really curious where you were going to go with it, and I really appreciate what you did with it. But I understand kind of the hesitation. I feel like I've heard from a lot of people that writing a character that they think might be unlikable is a challenge because that's realistic and you need that sometimes. But you just never know how that's going to land.
Yeah,
Um,
worked out okay, but you know, it
yeah.
was kind of, especially because I think like that like rakish kind of character can be a lot. That I tried to humanize her kind of as quickly as I could to make the payoff worth it, to kind of see
Mhm.
like she's performing what she thinks people expect from her.
Yeah.
Um, but she was just super fun. Like just kind of like say whatever that you're thinking, like just be kind of
Mhm.
like if you were a little less attractive, it'd be really creepy and pervy, but you're attractive, so people let you kind of say whatever you want.
It was almost a relief, I would say, that she did just say whatever she was thinking, because I feel like most of the books you read, the characters hold back, they're thinking it, but it takes them 6 chapters to say it. And she
Yeah,
just right out of her mouth, everything. And I was
yeah,
like, well, that's one way to do it. Like that,
yeah.
it was interesting to see how that played out. So uh Jamie Rose says, wife, girlfriend, bang buddy, out of all the 6 main characters of the series, who do you marry, who do you date, and who's the bang buddy?
Oh man, I'm giving this too much thought. Clearly, it's like there's no right answer. I think I'd have to like hook up with Roxy just to see, like, is it worth it? Probably. Um, I think what was the other one? Date and marry?
Hmm.
I think I'd marry Sam. I think she's like, I don't know, like the perfect combination of like so down to earth, but also um like sassy and smart assy and smart and interesting. And then I think I'd date Carmen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's those are good picks. I got a couple more and then I'm gonna hand things back to Jamie. Clara says your books rarely have a third act breakup unless it's necessary. I love that and it's so refreshing. Is it because you don't like to read them yourself or because you don't like to write them?
I don't like to read them or write them. Typically, I think they're hard to do right. I hate I hate a third act breakup that felt out of nowhere. I think sometimes when you're working towards it and you just know, like there's this big thing that there's a very good reason they're not dealing with, and it's gonna kind of pay off in this breakup in the third act. And I think there's plenty of authors who do it really well. But I think that's why I think about conflict so much before I start, that it's like by the time they get together, they've done all of like the building towards getting together so that they don't usually need to then have some other conflict come up that they can break up and get back together. I like the idea of working on communication. I like the idea of building something, and that's why I usually tend to slow burn and not third act breakup. Um, but I like the idea of working through things together, of learning how to cope as a couple with things, or learning how to build the foundation so you can be a couple. I think that's just more interesting. So it's just personal preference, I think.
Yeah, I do appreciate that about your books. So Catherine just has a comment. She says on Roxy, my favorite part is every time she joked about marriage and kids.
Oh,
Uh,
me too. She's so
And
cute.
then Danielle says during the book club, someone pointed out that Natalia and Sam were a more mature version of Adriana and Roxy. What are your thoughts?
Ooh, I would have thought a more mature version of Lola and Carmen, but I can see that too. I think there are a lot of really similar themes that were echoed through, and I don't think I did it very consciously, but I think there were a lot of themes that kind of came up again and again throughout the three couples. But I can totally see that.
So I have a question. Out of all of the books that you've written, what is your favorite of your own books?
Um, they're all really different. I think recently I went back to The Love Conspiracy, and I liked it quite a bit. I think it's almost more of a women's fiction than a romance, which I don't think I appreciated when I was writing it, but it was like very deep character work, and I really like that.
And I have a question too about the food. We talk about that a little bit in the book club too, but like lava flavored lives and the family feud over recipes and then the food that comes in. Can you talk a little bit about how you weave cultural foods versus food into the books and what it means for you?
Yeah, I try, and I when I first started doing it, I don't think I did it so on obviously Guava Flavored Lies was about, the two bakeries. So there was going to be a lot of food naturally in that. But I think as I've thought about it, so many people haven't experienced Cuban food. And so I think there's a lot of ideas about what it is, and maybe people sometimes think all Hispanic food is the same. So it's like we culturally don't eat spicy food, right? Like we eat very seasoned food, and we eat like a lot of pork and a lot of like whatever it is. So I think I've done it, now I've done it more intentionally to just kind of just share, like what kinds of food I ate growing up, and sometimes eat now, but it's like all very bad for you. There's not a vegetable in sight. So I think I like sharing that. I think I like sharing that part of my culture through food. And it's like that's how most of us get to know other people's culture, right? Is through food. It's the easiest thing to share and understand and appreciate and enjoy. And it's just really good. And I also do, I've been asked this before. I give myself major cravings. And then I'm like desperate for whatever it is I've been talking about, for like a week. And I'm just like, I need a pastelito now. I need it immediately. So sometimes I gain weight depending on the book I'm writing.
I can see that for sure. I have a question in the chat from Nick. Thanks for these wonderful books. They are great as they are, but if there was one thing you could change in one of the books, what would that be?
Oh, I think I would have made Natalia less intense so that I would not have had such a hard time when I had to write her. I think I would have made her like 50% less Natalia.
Wow.
No, but I'm very pleased, like, with her arc, but I definitely set myself up for a tough job. But then I grew to love her. So, like Sam.
Definitely. It was nice watching her armor start to come off for
Yeah,
sure.
very slowly.
Very, very slowly. It's like, oh, come on, one orgasm, maybe by somebody else. Anyway,
You and me both. You and me both.
so what author, Sapphic or not, do you appreciate?
Oh my gosh. I just got into EJ Noyes. I don't know if I'm saying that last name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Devouring their entire backlist. I'm obsessed. Um, Obviously, Milena Mackay is a big inspiration for me. I love the way she writes. Megan Lee, she only has the one, but I absolutely love her book. There's honestly so many. Kat Jackson, I'm a huge fan of. Um, we have so much talent. Honestly, we have just so much talent in our community. And I encourage everybody who has an idea for a book to write it, to write their story, because it's like we need more of it. We don't have enough of everything. We need literally more of everything. Yeah. I have more authors, but
Uh,
off the top of my head, those are the ones I thought of.
Mila's in the chat saying, "Hi, JJ." She's here today.
Hey, girl.
And then we're aware of the time as well. Are you okay for a few more questions, or what's your time?
Absolutely. Mhm.
You okay? All right. Um, next one I have is you're a self-publishing author. Why did you choose that path?
If you can't tell from all the control freak type A characters that I write, um, I am very type A control freak who literally I can't imagine having to change something I don't want to change. And I don't know if that's true or not. But it's been a very good experience for me. The only things I publish traditionally are the audiobooks. So I publish with Tantor and Podium. And that's just because I think it's like a whole other thing to learn, and it was just one thing too many. But I really like choosing things myself. I like choosing the exact story that I want to tell. I choose my editor. I choose my developmental editor, my copy editor, and it's exact, good or bad, it's exactly what I want it to be. And it speaks to my little heart.
Um, I got a comment from Clara that just says, yes, in all caps, feed our gay souls. So I'm going to second that.
Right.
I've got another question that says, do you feel there's enough diversity in Sapphic fiction, and what do you think we can all do to encourage more of it?
As I said, I think we need more diversity of every type, right? Like it's we all bring a little something different. I think even sometimes people think like, well, I'm not diverse enough. Yes, you are. If you grew up in a small town, we need your story. If you grew up, I don't know, whatever. I think we need more of literally everything. Because I think we can only write so much authentically. And I think things come out better when there are your kind of lived experience to some degree. you know, whether that be gender, whether it be, you know, cultural identity, whatever it may be, wherever you grew up, how you grew up, all these things that people don't ever think. I never thought I was like diverse, you know, I'm just me and I grew up how I am and I don't think of myself as being anything, right? But then you come to realize like, no, everyone has something unique about themselves to share and to infuse in a story that other people, it's the best way to experience other people too. You know, we read and you're like, oh, I didn't know how, you know, whatever it was like to grow up in Miami. And, you know, I have this idea of Miami. I didn't know what it was actually like. Or I don't have any, you know, Cuban friends. And where I live, there's no Hispanic people. So it's like, what better way to experience all different kinds of walks of life, right? Than to live in them. And I'd say write more. If you have a story, write it. I always encourage people, no matter what you think is not special about you, it probably is.
I think that's a great message. I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that with us. I've got a comment here that says, you have a wide range of careers in this series, 3 talent agents, a singer, a lawyer, a writer slash professor. Do you do research on these careers to make them believable, and what kind of research, or have you worked in any of these fields yourself?
I do. I do so much research. I think that's why I like lean on lawyers a lot for no reason I can think of. Um, because it's like easy, right? Because it's like, well, I know what that can be like, even different kinds of law that I've never practiced. It's like it's close enough, so it's less work to kind of research it because I think there's nothing more that kind of pulls me out when I have experience in like a particular field and I see it like misrepresented because then it's hard to buy into the rest. And I don't know if I'm the only one that happens to. So I never want people to feel that you're like, oh my God, nobody would do that, you know, or it's like that's not how that works. So if it's not a field I've personally worked in, so I'll borrow from like my wife's experiences from you know, people who are close to me and I'll like interview them and it's like give me the lowdown on what it's like. What do people I love to ask like what people get wrong about what your job is like because it's like I do not want to put that in a book because sometimes there's things that we see like we watch movies, TV or whatever it is and we get this certain representation. And it's like 90% of lawyer jobs are very boring. And that's why it's like you only see the moments in court or like whatever it is. It's like mostly it is boring. So it's like, what else can you do to kind of infuse the feeling of reality without being boring? Because it's like still entertainment. And so sometimes I'll read autobiographies if it's relevant. I'll read people's blogs. Like I'll follow people on Instagram if you know like to just kind of see like behind the scenes looks of what it is. And then if it's, you know, obviously I don't know a rock star, but usually you can ask people.
When you said plotter, you really meant it, huh?
Oh yeah,
Um, okay, I've got a
I'm
good
really
one
fun
for
at
you.
parties.
Do you actually have an interest in Lilith and her daughters, or did you just stumble into it and make her the focus of Sam's books?
So I had wanted, I've been percolating a vampire book for like almost 2 years.
Mhm.
And I've been doing a lot of research and thinking and world building. And so I kind of did it to force myself to think about it even more. And now I'm like halfway through the first paranormal book in like a duology, I think it'll be. Um, so I kind of used it, I think also as like an excuse to world build the idea even more. And then hopefully like plant some curiosity seeds about this kind of like vampire world.
Very nice. Very creative. I like that. Um, Now this is our last question. We want to respect everybody's time today. But this is kind of a twofer. So, when can we expect narration on book 3? And will you tell us more about what you're working on now?
Yes. So the narrator, I think she finished recording it, I think this week. And so I they haven't given me the date, but usually it's just like a few months after we have it. So, and I'm so excited. I'm obsessed with the narrator. So I am so excited to like hear her breathe life into the story. And then I'm currently working the chef book, as I've been calling it, which is like another age gap, is with the editor. So I'm hoping that'll be out this summer. And then I'm working on the paranormal throuple book, which when I had this amazing idea of like three people falling in love at once. I was so naive. It's so hard. There's so many feelings in one scene. But it's been so much fun, like absurdly fun. I haven't gotten to any of the steamy scenes. I feel like those I'm gonna definitely wish I could draw diagrams at the front of the chapter,
Mhm.
but your girl's gonna try. It would be a good time.
I believe in you, and I think we'll be here for it, diagrams and all. So,
Thank you.
um, well, listen, we really appreciate you coming and chatting with us today. We've had great fun. We all enjoy the series so much, and really appreciate kind of how consistent and prolific you are with the writing. And we hope you stick with it for a really long time. And we hope to have you back here with us again. This has been lots of fun.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a great time. I'm happy to chat anytime you want me. Thank you all for
Awesome.
being here.